Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition
that's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Hey Crosspointe. For those of you local to the Raleigh-Durham area, I wanted to give you an update on our Sunday morning in-person regathering plan starting in just a couple weeks on Sunday, March 13th. If you're not local to the area, then hopefully the next few moments can give you some further insight into the heart and values of our community. Now, it's still hard for me to wrap my head around that it was almost 2 full years ago that I announced that we were going to take a pause from gathering in person due to the pandemic. And over these past 2 years, many of us have endured and witnessed more crushing heartbreak and anguish than any of us could have previously imagined, and yet we've also experienced and witnessed unexpected moments of beauty and joy that have helped to remind us that love and hope still are breaking through. And through it all, these past 2 years, one thing that has remained clear the entire time is that there was no just let's get back to normal, or let's just go back to the way things were. Things have changed. The world has changed. We've changed. And you know what? Thank God we have, right? I mean, how do you live through a 2-year global pandemic and not be changed? So what's true of us individually is also true of us collectively as a Crosspointe community. And so, because of that, there's a lot that I have no idea how it's going to play out. I have people ask me all the time what I expect when March 13th gets here, and I keep responding, I really have no idea. But I'm really intrigued to discover who we become together after 3 months and 6 months, and then just see what happens. And while it's tough to know the ins and outs of all that, I'm confident it will be good and it will be marked by love. Now, with that said, here's a few details that I want to make sure that you know about in regards to Sunday, March 13th. We'll be offering one service time that goes from 10 a.m. to 11:15 a.m. So you only have to remember one starting time for now, 10 a.m. each Sunday morning. And during that same time, starting at 10 a.m., we will also be offering children's programming for infants through 5th graders. If you're on our email list as a parent, you should have received an email this past week with all the details for children's programming, or if not, you can find that info on our website under the Children's Ministry link. Additionally, we're going to have a separate service designed just for middle school students that also begins at 10 a.m., and then our high school students will have opportunities to serve in a variety of ways on Sunday morning or attend the adult gathering, and will continue to have their own unique programming at 6:30 p.m. each Sunday evening as they've done for a long time. Now, one of the significant ways we participate as a community on Sunday morning is through serving in some type of ministry area, whether with kids or with students, as greeters, technical roles, set up and tear down, etc. And so we're hopeful that many of you will sign up to serve on some type of rotation on Sunday mornings. And if you're interested in what that could potentially look like for you, simply email volunteer@crosspointe.org and we'll find a way to get you connected in a way that works and sounds good for you. Now, there's opportunities where you're able to serve before and after service, but also know Even if you serve during the service hour with our children or students, the hope would be that you would serve on a rotation of some kind that allows you to participate in the adult gathering in a particular rhythm, and realizing that now, even when you serve in an area during that 10 a.m. hour, you'll be able to experience the online service on demand at your convenience. Now, when it comes to the main adult gathering, one of the things that has happened over the past couple years is that it's given us time to take a step back and to reevaluate what our gatherings look like so that they better align with our values as a community. So for instance, in the past, we've had a big stage with big screens, video projectors, theatrical lighting, all that. And the reality is those things have served us really well for the past 20 years. But as we reflected on what moving forward looked like for our particular church community, it just felt like that those things started to create some conflict with things that we valued more. For instance, one of the things we've learned during the past 2 years is that we can deliver music and teachings online across the globe that can be viewed on demand whenever it's most convenient for someone to engage with that content. And frankly, that's just the world we live in now when it comes to content. I mean, when I was a kid and I wanted to watch a TV show like Different Strokes, we had to make sure that we were in front of the TV at 8 p.m. on a Friday night, but hardly anyone watches TV like that anymore. It's about how you can watch it on demand when it's most convenient for you and your schedule. And again, we've learned we can do that with teachings and music. So if we're gonna gather in person together and make that an important time together, it needs to be for more than just trying to get people into a room where we're all facing a big stage and listening to music and a teaching. Now, certainly that can be a part of it, and it will be, but it also needs to be more than that. Therefore, we're creating a much smaller stage where we can have the flexibility to occasionally mix up the way we set up the chairs in the room. We're still gonna have a live teaching and music, but we're also gonna be creating some intentional space where at times you can be quiet and reflect if you choose to, or have space for a conversation, or where we can serve together in some way, or ask questions after a teaching, or discover more about how to get involved with different justice and equality initiatives in our area. Basically, we're not moving to an hour and 15-minute service just so we can preach longer. In fact, it's just the opposite of that. We want to be more creative and intentional with the time that we have together each week. Now, rest assured, if that makes some of you a bit unsettled, I want to make sure that you know we're going to make it a safe space for whether you're an introvert or extrovert, for those who engage and learn in all sorts of different ways, different personalities. But we're intentionally also trying to make it a space where it's not easy to stay completely anonymous month after month after month. We want to be a community together. And if someone wants to remain anonymous, recognizing that for a season, that may even be best for some people. People will now have a great option online and on demand every week where that's available to them wherever they are in the world. Furthermore, another thing you may notice is that we're not planning on utilizing the big screens and projectors on a weekly basis. Because here's the deal. 2 years ago, our projectors were on their last leg, and we had known for a while that we were going to have to replace them in the very near future along with getting new screens, and the price tag for that was going to be north of $150,000. But after 2 years of a pandemic, and together as a church paying literally hundreds and hundreds of people's bills who found themselves in crisis, whether if they'd been medical bills or rent to keep them from being evicted or to keep food on people's tables, we just didn't think it honored our greatest values as a community anymore to spend that amount of money on something when we could figure out how to accomplish something similar for far less. So instead of spending $150,000 on that, we bought a few large TVs for about 5% of that cost, and we're going to use those to display whatever content that we need. Now, a couple other notes about our in-person gathering. First, let's talk about masks for a minute. I don't know about you, but this has become an exhausting conversation. There's so many different opinions, so much nuance, so much data, and all those things change constantly. And here's the deal. To no one's surprise, I'm not a medical expert. And whatever we decide, I've resolved that a good portion of people are just going to roll their eyes and disagree with whatever we do. It's just unavoidable. And from the beginning of this pandemic, I mentioned that we would listen to the best science that was available, listen to local, state, and federal authorities, and consult with medical experts within our own church community, take all that information in, and try to discern as best we can as leaders what's best for our particular community at Crosspointe. So here's where we're going to start off with masks come March 13th. Very well knowing any of this could change and pivot in any short amount of time. Heck, I mean, our thought process has changed in the last week alone already. But here's where we're going to start. We're going to ask and require that all of our staff and volunteers wear masks. And then, for everyone else, we're going to ask that you make the best decision for you and your family. Staff and volunteers will be interacting with lots of different people during the course of a morning, and we're especially sensitive to children under 5 whose parents don't have the opportunity to vaccinate them right now, even if their parents wanted to. So, in the spirit of loving our entire community, this is how we're going to start. So again, we're asking all staff and volunteers to wear masks, and everyone else, make the best decision for you and your family. And here's the thing. There's going to be people that will make different decisions in the best interest of their family, and that's okay. The labeling and contempt in our culture has just gotten out of control, and we need to model something different. Someone isn't naively living in fear if they choose to keep wearing a mask, and someone isn't unconcerned about their neighbor if they've taken wise precautions up to this point and feel like a mask is optional in this environment. And hopefully this goes without saying, because I really do trust the heart of all of you in this community, but I'll say it anyway. Obviously, if you have symptoms or have been exposed to COVID, or you feel like that the risk is too high for you personally, just be overly cautious, stay home, and participate that week online. Again, how we best love one another is the highest value. And so let's just keep that in mind and keep striving to love well. Another note about the service is we won't be passing an offering plate or a bag during the service for the foreseeable future. Again, people are understandably hesitant about passing anything around these days that a bunch of people have to touch. And so we're just going to eliminate that in the best interest of people. However, our collective efforts to fund all that we do together as a community is obviously still a major priority. So there'll be a secured box in the back of the auditorium that you can place any financial contributions in on a given Sunday morning. But what is most helpful for those of you who want to partner in funding what we do together, what's most helpful is to set up a recurring contribution online. So all you have to do is go to crosspoint.org/contribute. Now, I know I say this on a regular basis, or other people, or we play a video that points to this, but I really do want to tease this out for you, because this is what my own family has done for years, because we feel like it's not only easiest for us, but frankly, it's what best helps the church, where you can set up contributions at whatever interval you want. My family does weekly, others do every other week, others do monthly or quarterly. Again, it's however you want to do it. And so again, you only have to do this one time. You decide how much you'd like to contribute at whatever interval you decide, and then it just automatically happens. Whether you have it drafted from your bank or from stock accounts, or you put it on a credit card for points that you pay off every month, it's really whatever works for you. And it's super simple to change the amount anytime if you want or need to. Then you don't have to try to remember to log in every week and to say, oh, I forgot to contribute this week or this month. Or if you go on vacation or have a schedule conflict, or your kids have a sports tournament, or you just choose to watch online, your financial contribution still happens. And that allows our financial leaders here at Crosspointe to plan much more effectively how we can love and serve those in need on any given week, and what money will be available coming up to be able to help people in need, rather than just trying to guess from week to week. So we're trusting that if we eliminate passing an offering bag each week, which again seems in the best health interest of everyone right now, that those who believe in this community, who believe in our collective voice and what we do together to love and to serve, and who want to fund it, then we'll strategically lean in and we'll make that happen together. So again, if that's you, I'd encourage you to go to crosspoint.org/contribute. If you have any questions, you need some sort of assistance with that, simply contact finance@crosspoint.org, and we will help you with whatever steps that you need. Lastly, just to be clear, we'll still be creating a separate online service each week. The teaching that is released online will be the same teaching that will be delivered live on that Sunday morning here in Cary. However, as we've said before, we're not sticking a camera in the back of the room where you're watching an experience that other people are having. Rather, it's going to be similar to what it is now, where we've designed it for people watching online in whatever on-demand way makes sense for you. And furthermore, we're going to continue to be finding more and more ways for our online community to connect with one another. All right, no, that's a lot, but that's enough for now. I'll definitely keep you in the loop, but just know, Crosspointe, I'm excited to step into this next chapter with you and discover what we can learn and the kind of impact we can make together. You're loved.
Where can we run? Where can we hide? that you will not find us. Deepest of depths, highest of heights, your love it chases us. No matter where we've been, no matter what we've done, we can't escape your love. Oh, we will never see the end. We will never see the end of your goodness. We will never see the end. We will never see the end of your goodness. Though we pass through the fire, or we pass through the flood, you will be with us. Though we walk through the valley, the darkest of night, your love will be our light. When we are in plenty, or we are in want, you will always be enough. We will never see the end. We will never see the end of your goodness. We will never see the end. We will never see the end of your goodness. In our darkest hours, on our hardest days, we do not have to be afraid, for you will never leave, you will not forsake the promises you have made. In our darkest hours, on our darkest days, we do not have to be afraid, for you will never leave, you will not forsake the promises you have made. And we can say that we will never see the end. We will never see the end of your goodness. We will never see the end. We will never see the end of your goodness. We will never see the end. We will never see the end of your goodness. We will never see the end. We will never see the end of your goodness.
Come close, love. There's something that I want to take a look at together. Are you in a place where you can hear me? because I want you to really soak in what I have to say. I come offering transformation. I come full of love, and I so deeply want you to experience for yourself what is so often only talked about or imagined. My full presence to all things, my part in your being and your part in my being. I want to clean you up, cut off what no longer serves you, and show you how deeply and truly everything is enjoined to me. What's yours to do is going to sound simplistic, but it's hard. Trust me, I know. People tend to get in their own way when it comes to connection. So what I am asking you is to open, to show me where it hurts. Because right there is where I come in. I am meeting you sore to sore, wound to wound, to nourish you by the intimacy of my own blood and guide you into the mystery and miracle of my deep healing way. I want to bring you closer into me. I want you to experience me and my love firsthand, source to soul. I want you to know that you are soaked in me. You are within my love everywhere, always, and my love is never exhausted. So share the spirit of it freely. Give without worry or desperation. Let love move among you, soul to soul. My heart is set on you. I am here, active and present. I am yours and you are mine. I will never leave you. So trust, remain, rest assured. Be still and know you are within my love everywhere, always, source to soul, and my love is never exhausted.
Cloudless April sky, hotter than the stars that scorch the night, twirling in the tear that you can't cry. God is in the looking of your eyes. Happy as a dog laid in the grass, written in a nation's violent past, as empty as the time you try to pass. God is in the questions that you ask. Crumbling like the breakers on the beach, different as the languages we speak. God is in the people that you meet. Pure as babies in their mother's arms, broken as the loneliest of hearts, deeper than your soul, so torn apart. April sky, hotter than the stars that scorch the night, twirling in a tear that you can't cry. God is in the looking of your eyes. God is in the looking of your eyes. God is in the looking of your eyes.
Hi, I want to focus today on a passage found in the Christian New Testament book of Luke. And Steve talked last week about the first half of this chapter. It's Luke chapter 4. And in this passage, Jesus has read a passage of scripture and talked about bringing good news, restoring sight to the blind, releasing captives. And then when he expounded upon this passage, the people from his hometown wanted to throw him off a cliff because they were so upset with his interpretation of it. But Jesus walked away unscathed. And this is where I want to pick up. Jesus left this crowd. He went to a new town and he began a series of what we'd refer to as exorcisms and healings. And first, Jesus exorcises an unclean spirit who's inside of a man who is in the synagogue. Jesus calls upon the spirit to leave the man. And then Jesus is asked to come to the house of Simon to heal his mother-in-law, who has a fever. So Jesus goes to this house, and just like the man with the demon in the synagogue, Jesus heals the woman by rebuking the fever, and the fever leaves her. And Simon's mother-in-law immediately gets up and she begins serving them, Jesus and everybody who's with them. Now, it would be easy for us to think that this formerly sick woman is being forced to serve, but really what we should understand is that Jesus so completely healed her that she was able to take her place back in society. Serving guests, regardless of what we think about it now, that's where women at that time would have traditionally been. Jesus restored her. And then the passage says this: as the sun was setting, all those who had any who were sick with various kinds of diseases brought them to him, meaning Jesus, and he laid his hands on each of them and cured them. Demons also came out of many, shouting, "You are the Son of God." But he rebuked them and would not allow them to speak because they knew he was the Messiah. At daybreak, he departed and went into a deserted place, and the crowds were looking for him. And when they reached him, they wanted to prevent him from leaving them. But he said to them, "I must proclaim the good news of the kingdom of God to the other cities also, for I was sent for this purpose." So Jesus continues proclaiming the message of good news in the synagogues of Judea. And Jesus said, "I was sent to proclaim the good news." And it's important to understand that during this time, healing of this sort was entirely compatible with the views of human existence. Today, if we saw someone heal in the way that Jesus did, we probably would question it and analyze it and dissect it, likely believing that there was really something else going on that could be explained away. But much of the belief and this understanding of sickness and disability at this time was based upon something called physiognomy. And this is a pseudoscience. That was this belief that a person's physical characteristics, what they looked like on the outside, particularly their face, by looking at that, you could tell all about their inner character, what kind of person they were, what they would become. It was judging a book by its cover, so to speak. And that just by looking at a person, you could tell what to expect of them, what they were capable of, good or bad. Outer appearance determining inner character. So, for example, a person with a furrowed brow might imply that that person was angry or vengeful. Or someone who might have physical features that could also be seen maybe as resembling an animal, a pointier nose, big shoulders, like those pictures people take looking at their pets, you know, the ones I'm talking about when there's a pet and a human next to each other and they look similar, right? So similar characteristics. If someone shared a physical characteristic determined to be similar to that of an animal, it meant that they also shared corresponding characteristics of that animal. For example, they might think broad shoulders meant bear-like, and so that meant you were lazy or bad-tempered, or a person who maybe slightly resembled a fox or a rabbit would be considered timid, or someone who they thought resembled a lion might be considered overly courageous. Physiognomy was also the basis for more modern scientific racism, and later, pseudo-criminology. And the techniques and the reasoning behind treating a person a certain way during much of the first century wasn't that much different than the reasoning used to practice this pseudoscience in order to examine bodies of people of color under this guise of understanding cosmetic differences and skin tone. Black bodies, brown bodies were measured, were weighed, were experimented upon, were tortured under the guise of scientific exploration to determine if outward traits equated to internal differences, or if perceived understandings, such as pain levels or athletic ability, could be matched to some outward trait. And spoiler alert, they couldn't be. Outward appearance was also used as a basis for segregation, and not only in the United States, but across the world. In pseudo-criminology, it was determined at one time that certain outward traits determined someone's tendency toward criminality. Maybe they had shifty eyes or a certain shape of the face, the length of their arms or their legs, even forehead length. These were all believed to determine someone's tendency toward certain crime. Now, this isn't even in the first century. This is much, much later. Some of this is still being done today. When we look at statistics and we see the higher arrest, incarceration, and suspension rates of Black persons and persons of color versus that of white individuals, when statistically crime and deviant behavior is not higher among certain races at all. It's all something we perceive based on what we can see outwardly. So, of course, the results of these old ideas caused incredible harm to innocent people during the first century. They excluded them from society. They excluded them from community. They denied them rights. They denied them full citizenship. And when we think about this now, it's horrifying, even though we have practiced some of these same things in our own societies. But we practice still a form of physiognomy, often without even realizing we're doing it. I have often made assumptions about someone because of their outward appearance. I have wrongly assumed both that a person was impoverished or dangerous because of how they looked or what they were wearing, and I have wrongly assumed that a person was safe or wealthy because of those same measures. I have placed value upon fellow humans because of how they appear, because of how they talk, where they work, how they parent, what they purchase, because of their perceived ability or their different ability. I am so good at passing instant judgment based on appearance, based on my own hidden biases. And as much as I'm ashamed to admit it, I am guilty of assuming, often without even realizing, that a person with a physical or mental impairment or difference doesn't have as a fulfilling a life as I do, or that they want the life that I have, or that they do not have quite as much value of someone who is considered to be of able mind and body. But I would never say that out loud. It's deep within me if I really think about it. I don't even realize I've thought it or that I believe it until the thought has already worked its way in and out of my mind. Hidden biases. Why do we do this? It's almost like we can't help it. Well, just like the society that Jesus lived in, we live in a society that typically assigns value based upon someone's production value, what their perceived, tangible contribution to society is. Because the standard we've given the world is me. It's us. It's those who are able-bodied, or at least the imaginary version of me or us that we aspire to. And it's worth asking ourselves the question, what do we view as normative? Why? What standard am I assigning people to live up to? Where did that come from? There was no term for disability in the cultures that produced the biblical texts, like the ones we just read. However, body normativity was clear. In the Roman Empire, during the time of Jesus, normative bodies by which all other bodies were compared was the male Roman body. And imagine the last time you went to an art museum and saw a chiseled Roman or Greek statue, right? So, of course, not all the citizens of the Roman Empire were Roman or even Greek, and they would have never had a Roman normative body because bodies, like today, varied greatly. And the further away one got from cities, the more unlike Roman male bodies individuals became. Skin tone, bone density, height, texture. The inferiority of a person was determined by the amount of variation from the ideal Roman body perfection. We never do that today. It was understood that a person's animalistic characteristics, their lack of moral character or that of their parents, had caused them somewhere along the line not to achieve this standard. And it was the same with illness and disability. Something had gone wrong to not allow you to achieve this standard, and therefore you were not equally welcome in society. And in the first century Western world, in the world of Jesus, sickness, illness, disability, they were seen as the responsibility of the individual to correct. And impairment, either through illness or disability, not only meant that living in the first world was more difficult in general, but it also meant that on top of that, you were a social outcast. There weren't accommodations made, anything like that, because your production value had gone down. Society viewed illness and disability as deficiencies, not just differences. And it invoked this idea of incompleteness. We would maybe call this ableism today. So when Jesus healed someone of an illness, of a differing ability, it meant not only bodily healing, but it meant a reintroduction and a restoration into society, back into their community, like Simon's mother-in-law with the fever, going back and being included completely. No more isolation, no more fear from other people. They were restored to their community. And in a way, this is the problem with Jesus' healings. and his exorcism miracles, they can give the impression that only people who truly love Jesus will ultimately be healed. They can give the impression that everyone in the kingdom of God has a societal, normative body and mind. But when we think about it, this doesn't really sound like Jesus, does it? It was equally important the times that Jesus did not heal individuals, because their non-healing wasn't a moral failure on their part, nor was it a personal deficit, as difficult as living in the first century with a disability or illness must have been. There's multiple things to take from these stories, this one particular chapter. But what has stuck with me recently is my own need to rethink my understanding of human value based on contribution. Perhaps this passage is a lesson for those with able bodies to be exorcising from ourselves the blindness and the fever that prevents us from viewing all people from an invisible standard. Perhaps it's a challenge for the able-bodied and minded to be a part of restoration to society. And I'm struck by the fact that in a society that based worth on outward appearance and refused to touch the ill and the differently abled, Jesus walked among. He touched those who had been excluded and who he was told not to touch. He saw them as equally important, and he saw walking among them and healing as equally, if not more important than his teaching a sermon in a synagogue. Jesus told that crowd that he had come to preach the good news, and then he showed the good news with his feet and in his actions and with his hands and with the way that he interacted with people. And sometimes the good news comes in the form of a good word. And sometimes it looks like the gentle hands of acceptance and restoration. And Reverend Barbara Brown Taylor says that the problem with miracles is that we can't witness one without wanting one of our own. It's so true. Everyone knows someone who could use a miracle, or we could use one ourselves. And it is incredible to think of bodies no longer being in pain, no longer having difficulty in an able-bodied world. That Christ felt both relieved, he felt and he relieved inner and outer pain. But perhaps how and where Christ chose to do miracles says something else too. Because from a traditional standpoint, healing meant bodily healing for these individuals. For those of us who are able-bodied, we often assume that these healed bodies were simply made normative. But what if we're missing something key? Perhaps one of the things that we have missed in the miracles and in the teachings of Jesus is a message of hope embedded in these stories. Not hope that the differently abled or ill will be made in society's image of perfection, but that society, or at least the people of God, would be the thing that transforms and are able to view all people, regardless of ability, as whole and equally important, and able to teach us new perspectives of God, just as they are. Maybe the hope is that there's no need to fix or restore bodies, because regardless of the standard that humanity puts forth, in the eyes of God, we're all already complete, regardless of what we are able to do. Simply being is contribution enough to the world. Perhaps the message is for us to begin to understand God in a broader way when we view from a perspective outside of our own. Perhaps the message of the healing and the exorcism miracles is not for those with body and mental differences, but for those who are viewing the healings and the non-healings, and understanding that all are welcome in the kingdom, regardless of body and mental status. Because it's not, in fact, only the able-bodied who can have a meaningful relationship and be followers of Christ. Jesus healed as an act of compassion, to heal from pain, to save from death, but more importantly, to restore persons to society. A society which had not yet allowed for them to be viewed as whole and useful until they had bodies and minds that functioned within a certain acceptable scale. And if we're to be bringers of the kingdom of God, perhaps we need to rethink normativity and what contribution to a community really means. And perhaps we need to create spaces where all people can be a part and contribute, regardless of their abilities. And at the very least, I think it should probably cause us to pause when we find ourselves making assumptions about persons based solely upon what we can assess with our own senses. I think we should also remember that the Christ who performed these miracles, these healings, and these exorcisms also had a broken body. It was, in fact, through a broken body that the world was shown the greatest act of love. And when Jesus was resurrected, it was not with a perfect body. It was in a body that still held the scars of his brokenness. And Jesus was recognized by those who knew and loved him, not by his perfection, but through his scars. The disciple Thomas only recognized Jesus by his wounds. So, how then should we think of this passage in Luke? Well, to borrow from Jeff's teachings a few weeks ago, we employ the yes and. We can recognize the healings of Jesus as bodily and mental healings that restore bodies and mind and give us hope for the same. Yes. And we can recognize these healings not as Christ's sole purpose being body or mental normativity, but as a way to restore persons to their communities. And so, community, you and I and us, community, what preconceived notions about persons do we need to put aside? What standards of normativity do we need to rethink? And how can we follow in the footsteps of Christ and practice healing through restoration without the expectation of societal normativity? For those of us in our community who are not equally abled in body or in mind, I apologize for the times that we have not recognized you as equally valuable in our community. You are valued simply because you are. There is not a standard that you need to reach. And as we are in our spaces this week, may we pay attention to our hidden assumptions and biases that we base upon our senses. May we recognize differences as new ways to understand God. And may we find new ways to include and to understand. And may we broaden our understanding of worth. Let's continue to be people who love. This is the good news. Have a good week.
Thank you for joining us today, and welcome home. If you are in need of assistance during this crisis, please reach out at crosspoint.org/help.